So today, my friend Art Ballard is going to show you guys how he goes through our hubs and services the bearings and everything. We run a quad lock Bicknell tube with a 2 7/8 bearing with a Burt hub and a strange oil oval drive flange. We got PFC brake rotor, caliper with precision hydraulic and oil, brake hoses, and Outpace racing products, greasable rod ends, and radius rods. So that's what we're working with. Art's going to show you how to service it all.
So we're going to start by cutting all the safety wires on the flange. So we can remove the So we'll get it some love taps here and see if we can work the flange out. And I want to go back and forth so I don't burr it up too bad. Oh, and this one here happens to have an axle in here. During storage sometimes we remove it, but that will not affect me doing the bearing work right now. And I got ahead of myself because I have to remove these PFC foot calipers. Quite simple. And we'll set her aside here. So now that gives me more access to the hub. Now there's a lock retainer here. Yeah. That retainer prevents the lock from turning. And a custom homemade spanner wrench that Rich modified because the original ones don't hold up very long. Give it a little tap. And now I can remove the, I'm going to call it an adjusting nut. There we go. We're getting closer to the bearing. Comes. There's our outer bearing. And a quick visual, I'm looking for any metal chips or any abnormal patterns, overheating and such. So I have to clean this up in the solvent, I'll get a better look, but nothing catches my eye right off the bat on that one. So now as I remove the hub, this is where we've got spacer, the actual wheel bearing spacers. And they're from Bicknell, and we had we're looking for like a 1/1000th of an end play on it. So we had, as far as that, we're okay on that. So we should be able to reuse that one after we inspect and repack the bearings. So now my next step is I've got a seal washer here, which looks pretty good. I'll remove and clean that one. But we won't bother getting into that. It's pretty simple. Just slides off, cleaned up. Now we're going to go to get this inner seal and bearing out. Let's see how this goes. So I've got a snap ring that holds the seal. Pretty simple. I have a little sound effects here.
Yeah, I hate that so much.
Clean the groove out a little bit. I'm going to removing it isn't a big deal as far as cleanliness. Reinstall, we want to be sure everything's nice and clean. All right, tools here. Aluminum bearing driver. That way if it slips and misses, the aluminum will mar up instead of hurting the bearing. Because at this point we still plan to reuse this one. All right. I've removed the snap ring, lubricated the seal, and one good tap should drive it right out. Like I said, 2 taps should get it out.
1 or 2. No one's counting.
Okay, so along with inspecting the bearing, we have an inner rail the bearing rides on. looking for any imperfections. The biggest thing I'm looking for is metal chips and or any pitting. Now I see on these there's a little bit of staining. As any vehicle sets for any length of time, the bearing stays in one position just due to moisture. You're liable to get a lot of staining. We don't really have a concern with that. So right there is one little stain mark. But I like to drag my fingernail to feel any roughness, and I do not. So Mike likes to keep on top of these, so they're actually serviced quite often. So at that point, we got time to inspect them a lot more.
We clean and we come back and break.
And the key factor is I want to be sure not to mix up the bearing, because the bearing itself has actually mated itself to the race. So don't want to mix the two bearings even though they're the same part number. And visually look at the seal for any tears. This one looks pretty good. And like I said, there's low hours on these, so a lot of times we'll reuse them unless we see a reason to change them. So I will clean the bearings and the hub all up in the solvent, and we'll come back and I'll show you how I actually pack the bearings. So I think I have an update to share with you. Normally on the rear seal or inner seal, the seal would normally ride right on the actual tube, which is aluminum and will cause the actual tube to wear and premature failure. Mike is updated with a DMI. I'm going to call it a seal ring. And that just slides over the tube. It's got its own O-ring to seal it there, and then the replacement seal fits right on there. So if there's any wear whatsoever, we can replace these rings and not have to worry about changing the whole tube. This comes from DMI. Okay, so I've cleaned all the bearings and seals and all the other spacers and all the other miscellaneous hardware we got here. So I did not find any indication that we needed to change any of the bearings, just cleaned them up. Like we keep a pretty good maintenance schedule on this, so that's probably why nothing really needs to be done except routine maintenance. So the way this is done, and probably you've all seen bearings packed the old way where you put the grease in your hand and go like that. This is Mike's preference. I think it gives it a little less drag on the, so he's got this special nano ceramic racing grease. He gets that from Superior, I believe. Superior Lubricants.
Yep.
Along with the bearings and a lot of his lubricants. So what we do here is that now that I've got all cleaned, air dried it, cleaned it with brake clean, air dried it again, and then put a light film with WD-40, and then now we'll go with this nano grease. I slide it in between the bearing, every other one he does, or I should say I'm doing, and it squirts out and go to the next one. Alrighty, I'm gonna take this excess, just run it around the bearing a little bit here. Set it in the hub, made it with the race, work it back and forth. Look in there, make sure I got plenty of coverage. And that's the way it ends up, not a whole lot of grease. Well, we got left on my hand, I'm gonna run around the edge where the seal's gonna be tapped back in place. All right, put a light film of the grease on the seal where it's gonna meet. Kind of pushing it as much as I can. Get it somewhat centered and squared. And my preference is take a 2x4, that way you get a better, keeps it square, and just give it a couple good wraps. See, make sure she's going in, and I didn't, that was all it took.
Magic.
So now, snap ring goes back in place, which I've already cleaned all the dirt and debris off of it, because it collects everything. Just give it a couple taps, make sure it's seated. And I like to rotate it, because a lot of times you see if it's not in, which it is. So that's what the inner bearing's all greased, clean grease, and installed with the new seal. Put some more grease around the seal where she's going to ride on the or in the O-ring. Just put it around. Come to a halt. there you go. Although I put some on the seal, I still like to put some around the edge. Slide the hub on. Just made it nice. One spacer, two, that's what we took out with a, okay. So the next would be, I would install the bearing, but which I haven't greased yet. Same procedure on that, and then I can come back and I'll show you how I adjust it. Thrust washer, it's got an index groove or keyway that keeps it from spinning. Now the adjusting lock ring, it's brand new. Okay, this is where it probably changes a little bit that some people may not know. You grease guys probably already know that, obviously. But I'm not technically really adjusting the bearing. The bearing was already preset with those spacers that were in there. So if I were to just on a normal bearing without those spacers, get in there and attempt to tighten it, I would definitely over tighten the bearing where she would overheat and even restrict rotation. So because the spacers are in there now, I just bring her on and just snug it up good. Make sure we got good rotation. Get fresh grease so there's a minor drag to it. And make sure we don't have any end play. Seems to be holding. So now, put the lock ring in to prevent that from turning. Of course, you saw the pressure I put in it. I doubt it would anyway. So my holes didn't line up, so I'm going to flip it and see what I got here. Okay, that looks good. I want to try and get one as close as I can to this cutout tang, because if I put them over in here somewhere, that's liable to lift up and then allow it to rotate. So now what goes on here, the flange has an O-ring on it to prevent dirt and moisture getting in. Have to line up with the axle. There we go. I like to put never seize or anti-seize on all the bolts, especially where they meet into aluminum. Now maybe I'll have to move these around depending on where the drill index shows up. Went in star pattern to try to prevent any cocking of the flange. I'm not going to tell them when I'm torquing there because there might be some haters out there. You ready?
Yeah.
Torque all 5 and hope that the index shows up. Try to get them all facing towards the center. So these 3 here are probably pretty close. These are way off, so I'm going to try moving them. Hey.
Did we get it?
Yep, we got them all somewhat down at the bottom side, and that's where I want them. And then I can start with the safety wire and go down through the spot. Everybody probably does it differently. Okay, so I'm going to unwind it because I jumped the gun there. Fish the wire through the next hole.
And we do this all the way around.
Yep.
Okay. Are we finishing her off now?
I'm trying.
We're trying.
It's not as neat as I would like it, but I guess the end result is all it's got to do is hold it. And I'm trying to lace it around here so don't catch our fingers on it and whatnot.
Hey.
Another snap ring. We want to set it up so it's not, doesn't stop at the groove here. There we go.
Nice.
I heard it and I saw it clip in. So that's it for this one. Move on to the front. Done similar. Well, I have to put the brake on too. The only difference is we don't have the flange for the front one, but it's still the same identical procedure. Get this caliper on there. Make sure the pads are back in place. So, service the wheel bearing, inspect it.
That's how it's done?
That's the way we do it. And I'm always double checking myself.
Good job.
So I'll get some brake clean and clean the rotor off and get all my fingerprints off of it.